Hello, my name is Gretchen Baskerville, and I'm the author of The Life-Saving Divorce, Hope for People Leaving Destructive Relationships. I've been a Christian divorce recovery leader in churches for more than 20 years. I also run an online group for separated and divorced Christians who needed life-saving divorces. These aren't "I'm bored" divorces, or "I miss the party life" divorce, or "I feel unfulfilled" divorces, or "you just don't squeeze the toothpaste correctly" divorces. You see, about half of divorces in the United States are for very serious reasons: a pattern of sexual immorality, physical violence, chronic emotional abuse, abandonment, life-altering addictions, or serious neglect. So if I'm involved with Christian divorce recovery ministry, why am I talking about marriage books? Well, because some marriage advice actually makes marriages worse, not better. And then people end up in my group. Today, I'm going to suggest that one of the most popular Christian books on the market can actually make marriages worse, not better, by enabling abuse and setting up a win-lose marriage. But let's talk about the harmful books: Sheet Music, The Act of Marriage, The Power of a Praying Wife, His Needs, Her Needs, For Women Only, Every Man's Battle, and Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. So what does a Christian marriage author have to do to earn that bottom slot in the harmful category? How did Emerson Eggerichs and his book Love and Respect get there? Well, he got there because the survey last year of 20,000 Christian women put him there. They were asked an open-ended question, not multiple choice. They came up with the title. It wasn't from a list given in the survey. So if you're considering what book to offer in a small group study or for a marriage retreat, Love and Respect by Eggerichs probably isn't your best choice. I asked women and men in my private divorce recovery group what they thought of the book. In just 24 hours, I got a ton of responses. Most said they had actually read the book and that it had been part of a Sunday school class or a small group or a marriage retreat, or just given to them by well-meaning friends. And most said the book harmed their marriage. Many said it turned their husbands into selfish, self-centered brats. And by the way, that's my phrase, not theirs. Judging from their comments, I don't think Eggerichs understands domestic violence and emotional abuse. And by not condemning it, he actually accidentally encourages it. At the end of this, I'll link a video of him on stage giving a talk at Houston's First Baptist Church, where he describes criminal physical violence in his own childhood home and doesn't even call it abuse. Now, I want to be fair to Eggerichs. I did get some positive comments, which I'll read first. Here's a woman who said, his book helped our marriage a lot. And she goes on to say she's led small groups using his book. She never saw a problem with his book and never read anything saying that men needed sex more. Here's a kind comment from a man who's divorced from an abusive wife. He said, I read the book and attended a couples group study. For two reasonable people, the information was excellent. But narcissists don't change, and they're not capable of admitting fault and changing. It was a waste. Here's another comment from a woman who said it helped her, but not her husband. I read it. It would be good for a non-abusive marriage. I did become more respectful, and he became more entitled. It really doesn't help a one-sided marriage. Or this comment, we read part of it. Our church did a Sunday morning class on it. At the time, I didn't think I had an issue with it. But after all the abuse I've gone through in 20 years of marriage, now it makes me puke. Respect needs to go both ways. Now, let's move on to the negative comments. And I'm not going to read them all, or this video would be hours long. The negative ones are really interesting. Some Christian couples read the book together, but in other cases, the husband was given the book first, and he read it and was affected by its message in a destructive way. You see, whether Eggerichs intends to hurt marriages or not, His book actually has done harm in many homes, according to his readers in my Christian divorce recovery group. Okay, here's the first comment. My husband and I read it and did the study. It increased the abuse in my marriage because my ex believed he now had a legitimate reason to blame even more things on me because his need for respect wasn't being met. I remember the public abuse increased after we did the study. It was like he genuinely felt biblically justified in what he was doing in order to get the respect he felt he needed. It portrayed the women as needing mostly love and not very much respect. I remember thinking that I needed respect just as much as my husband, but the book told me that the Bible says I don't need that. I came away from the study once again persuaded that God really doesn't care about me as a woman. Here's another comment. I read it in desperation, clutching at any tool to help what I eventually realized was an impossible cause. It made me realize my husband's actions or reactions were reasonable, when in reality, they were abusive. I eventually realized I was the only one doing anything about our issues, while he was the only one causing them, and nothing, no amount of respect would make him happy. I very happily threw the book in the dustbin recently, and am praying for growth and understanding just how worthy of respect I am. Or this comment, I read the book and did a weekend retreat based on it. I thought there was a lot of good information, but it didn't help our marriage. I look back and thought it helped at the time, but I think it made things worse over time. He started using that phrase over and over, that I needed to respect him, while he continued to be mean to me and do very little to help the marriage. I finally had to leave the marriage. Or this comment, I read it a few years ago after a trusted pastor preached a sermon on love and respect. It was, to date, the best sermon ever. So I went into the book with an open mind and heart. The parts in the book related to sex made me so sick, but I trusted the advice would work. Most of the rest I really believed could work, and I suppose a lot of it would if both people loved God and actually had a conscience. I looked through the book a few months ago and I honestly could have thrown up. That book set me up to be abused so much worse than I already was, especially sexually abused. It makes me physically ill to think that all I was to him was a dumpster. That book just pushed me into the alley. Here's another comment. I read the book and we went to a Wednesday night small group to watch a video series based on the book. It led to an escalation of his entitled attitude, a decade of abuse, and a demand for respect, which correlated a decrease in behavior that would earn respect. Or this comment, yes, I read Love and Respect, and at the time, we were pretty much told it was the Bible. You had to follow it no matter what. Looking back, it was not helpful in any way. One day, a person at church mentioned something from the book, and my husband said, "See, you have to call me Lord." He thought he should have all the respect, and I should just be the good listener. Or this comment, my ex accused me often of being disrespectful, but I just couldn't see it. So I read the book and applied it. Nothing changed in my marriage. The more I attempted to show respect, the less I felt loved. The accusations of disrespect only increased. My ex believed that respect for him didn't need to be earned. It was all based on his position. After I left the marriage, one of the biggest surprises to me is how well I get along with men. It turns out they actually feel respected by me. Or this comment, we got the book at a weekend to remember. Our marriage was already in bad shape, but I marked that weekend and the study of those books as the point of no return. His abuse increased 100-fold, and I believed more than ever that it was scriptural for me to just submit, suffer, and take it. Or this comment, My husband brought home that book. I followed Eggerichs' practice of respect, even though I didn't agree with his definition. Eggerichs' definition included having a non-reactive facial expression and demeanor. My husband noticed the difference in my behavior, but his behavior just got more outrageous. Or this comment, I read the book and discussed it with my husband. He began to define everything he did not like as a lack of respect. It enabled his bad behavior. Or this comment, he was so stuck on respect after this book. One night he went into a rage simply because I disagreed with him on something without raising my voice or having an attitude, just because I had a different opinion than he did. He came after me while I was pregnant and tried to kick me out of the house in the middle of the night. Or this comment from a man. Our former Calvary Chapel church thought the book was wonderful and used it as curriculum for married couples. Eventually, my wife and I started to laugh about the silly stereotypes it promoted. Once in a small group, it was my wife's turn to read a section of scripture. Her new study Bible was different than the approved New King James Version, and it did not read at all like what the leaders anticipated. Other women immediately asked her, "What version are you reading?" Leadership changed the subject. Honestly, their embrace of that book was a big reason we found another church. Or this one, I read it and at the time thought it was a good book. I was brainwashed into thinking I had to make all the changes and then he would magically become the godly husband I needed. After reading the book and going to the seminar, I just felt beaten down. I felt like I had to be a martyr in my marriage and blindly respect him despite being mistreated. I only had a sliver of hope that maybe he would love me in return for respecting him, even when he didn't deserve it. For a while it worked, but it was only because I was showing my ex-husband respect, even while he was in sin. I never questioned him. So of course he was happy with that. It didn't actually fix anything in our marriage. Or this comment, I didn't read the book, but my husband did. He began telling me he didn't feel respected by me. Anytime I didn't agree with him, he regarded it as disrespect. He would characterize me as being disrespectful repeatedly. I believe that book gave my husband much ammunition to use against me. Or this comment, I read Love and Respect. It just gave license to more abuse and entrapment. It's a horrible book. Or this comment, it was given to us during one of our many counseling sessions. My husband read it first. I'm pretty sure it's the only marriage book he was ever enthusiastic about. I started to read it and didn't get very far. This was long before I had even an inkling I was living in abuse or had any knowledge of abuse dynamics. But this book kind of felt incredibly icky. I felt like I was being set up. I only read 30 pages or so and refused to read any more. Of course, that made me look bad, but oh well. Or this comment, it was recommended for us in marriage counseling. I read part of it and it kept mentioning how men want respect. And I kept thinking, I want respect too. I want to be heard and for my opinion to count. That's what I consider respect. I couldn't even offer a different opinion than my soon-to-be ex-husband, or that would be considered by him disrespectful. Now let's talk about when husbands read it first. Here's a story. I purchased the book and it arrived while I was away, and my husband read it. He was ready for me when I got home. His first words were, now he understands that it's my lack of respect that began to destroy our marriage. That's it. My marriage was downhill from there. That book was a death blow. Or this comment, I refused to read it because he shoved it at me and told me to read it to see everything I was doing wrong. He demanded respect, bar none. And let me tell you, I was never respectful to my ex, but he always told me that I was horrible and could do nothing right. Or this comment, My husband went to a love and respect conference by himself to save our marriage. I agreed to show up for dinner. And when I showed up, they were watching a video. I sat down next to him and he said to me, "You showed up at just the right time. This part of the video is so you will quit screwing up." One of Eggerichs' teachings is about the crazy cycle, where the couple just reacts negatively to one another and it spirals downhill from there. But somehow Eggerichs just doesn't seem to draw a line on what's abusive. Here are two comments from Christian readers about his crazy cycle teaching. I read the book early in the marriage when I didn't realize that my husband was emotionally abusive. I begged him to stop neglecting me and my feelings. I knew he was damaged from childhood abuse, and I told him that I wanted to work on this together. And he agreed. But in actuality, he never worked on anything. So I required less of him emotionally and made myself smaller in an effort to manage his moods. The positive side is that during this time, I clung to God, and that's what got me through. And that's what's sustaining me now that I've gotten out. That book is a part of my story, and I tried to be nice and stop the crazy cycle, and it didn't help. I had a lot of empathy for my husband, but he didn't have any for me. Or how about this comment about the crazy cycle? I read it, and instead of helping me find a way to get off the crazy cycle, the book trapped me like a gerbil on a crazy wheel of abuse and toxicity. As I mentioned before, one of the problems is that Eggerichs doesn't really appear to understand abuse or to take it seriously, even the most criminal behavior. For example, in this 2019 video series, totaling nearly 90 minutes, he tells a bit of his own story as an adolescent. His father tried to strangle his mother, which is very serious, as we all know, and a felony in many cases. His mother left for 5 years. And apparently, Eggerichs' father sent him to a military school for 5 years due to family issues. The timing of these two incidents isn't clear. But what's interesting is Emerson doesn't condemn his father's actions. He doesn't call strangling criminal or domestic violence. He doesn't even say it was abusive. So if he doesn't recognize the strangling of his own mother as abuse, he really doesn't believe in abuse at all. He doesn't talk about his mother's safety or that she was justified to get away, or any change in his father's behavior that caused her to return 5 years later. He merely suggests that coming to Christ is all you need. And yet in the comments I just read to you, nearly all of those were Christian church-going couples. So to pastors and Bible study leaders, I say this: find a better book to use. Here are the best ones. I'll also give you the list and links in the show notes. And to Christians who are told to put up with abusive behavior, I say, I'm sorry for what happened to you. Some of our Christian marriage authors misled you, but God loves you. You're precious to him, and he never wanted marriage to be that way. The Bible says you can love someone, forgive someone, and choose to walk away. In fact, in several verses, including 1 Corinthians 5:11, the Bible says you must. But now I am writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister, but is sexually immoral or greedy, an idolater or slanderer, a drunkard or swindler. Do not even eat with such people. Or this Bible verse, 2 Timothy 3:1-5. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. Again, here are the books that were found to be more helpful for Christians, and the list and the links are in the show notes.